Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
In our last session, we have discussed some topics to get an idea about framework of social policy of India as well as some other countries of the world, or the widely accepted framework of social work or social policy in India and most of the countries of the globe. Now, in this particular session, and after that we have also discussed how India adopted reforms or new economic policy which has influenced or which has shaped the social policy framework of India. Now, in this session, we would like to discuss, or we will be discussing, the social development situation in India. Social development situation in India. Now, when we say social development situation in India, we cannot talk about in a consolidated term, because India is a vast country, and not only that, what is more important, that in India there is a lot of variation, lot of difference in terms of social development situation. So when we talk about social development situation of India, we will have to look into this variation, this regional variation of social developmental situation in India. So, what we intend to do in this session, we would like to look at this regional variation of social development situation in India, but not only we will confine to India itself when we discuss about this regional variation in social development in India. We would also look at some other countries of the world, so that we have a better understanding of where India stands, or where a particular region of India stands. Okay. So, we will discuss a social development situation in India with a regional perspective, and what is important here, we would like to discuss, we will have the discussion in the context of reform. What lesson we can have on reform, the policy of reform about which we have discussed, as we have mentioned that the reform policy which shapes the social development framework of our country. Now, so we would look at social development situation of regions of India as well as social development situation in some other countries briefly, and we will also discuss what lesson we can have, or in terms of in the context of the reform or new economic policy that we have adopted in our country. Reforms and social means, actually we will be focusing on particularly on social means, how social means are important in implementing reform. Okay. As we have mentioned that a process of reforms involving greater reliance on market mechanism has been initiated in India since 1991. That we have discussed, and we have discussed how this has taken shape, how this has come about in our country in our earlier session. Now, the issue is, outside India reform have been universally welcomed. When India adopted reform, it has been widely accepted outside India, because earlier India was a little bit closed economy. So, when we have opened up our economy through the process of reform, through globalization, this has been welcomed outside India. But this reform or the new economic policy or the market reform, this is widely debated in India. In our country, still there is a lot of debate. Shall we go for market reform? Will that be in the interest of our country, or will that bring some harm to our economy, etc., etc. So, there has been wide debate, and that debate is divided between the two groups. Some economists or some policy makers, they are pro reform, and some are against reform. Now, in our discussion, we will not take part in that debate, but what we will do, we will take this debate in a different plane, not in terms of pro reform or anti reform. What we would like to do, that we would like to link the strategies of development to the ends of development. That means, why reform? Aim of reform is to achieve development. So, actually we say we argue that reform is for achieving development, okay, or market reform. Goal of market reform is to, if we adopt market reform, our economy will develop, okay. So, reform is a means for achieving development. Now, our question is, what is the end of development? What is development? What is development? Can we link reform with development, and how can we? Why do we seek development? Okay, that means, or what we'd like to do, we would like to investigate the means we should adopt for development. Like, is it that we can achieve development through market reform? Now, why we seek development? Because we assume that development would offer a better life, better life for the majority of the people. What is that better life? Better life means most of the people will have better income, they will have education, they will have employment, they will have job, they will be educated, etc., etc. Okay. So that is what is the goal of development. Now, question is, can we start with these social means? Like, when we talk about reform, like, instead of saying that reform will bring us these things, like what we are arguing, that why don't we start by adopting policy which will give us better education, which will ensure job, which will free us from poverty, etc., etc. Like, if we straight away start with that, then what happens? In other words, we are talking about social side of economic operation, that what is the role of social development in economic operation. What role, like if we supposing if we take a policy, if we forget about reform, like if we take some policy which will enable us to have better social life, okay, improved social life, as I said that a life free from poverty, free from hunger, with education, with better health, then what will be the impact of that? In other words, what we are saying, that achieving reforms will depend on social means. Like we are not saying that we are not going into the argument of whether we should go for, we are for reform, we are against reform. What we are trying to say, that for achieving reform itself, we should adopt social means. Okay, let me elaborate that. How that is helpful. Like if we are able to create human capabilities, like a better life for human being, of course that has some intrinsic value. Okay, like creating better human capability itself is good enough. Okay, but apart from having that type of value, creating better human capabilities also contribute to economic development, or this has instrumental role for this play an instrumental role, or human capabilities play an instrumental role. Okay, now we will elaborate this a little further. When we got independence, Nehru gave a famous speech, the Tryst with Destiny. In that speech, Nehru mentioned that what is our task? Tasks ahead of us include the ending of poverty and ignorance and disease and inequality of opportunity. When he got independence, that time we are a poor nation. Majority of the people were living in poverty. People were ignorant, illiterate, superstitious. People were suffering from various diseases often, and there was high inequality of opportunity because our society was divided in terms of caste and class, etc. There is a lot of inequality. So Nehru said that what is the goal we have in front of us? At the time of independence, when Nehru gave his speech, that time he says that we have to end poverty, we have to end ignorance, disease, inequality of opportunity, etc. Okay. Now, actually, he did not mention about growth, or say growth rate of growth rate is not the ultimate test of success. Okay, importance of achieving economic and social progress cannot be overemphasized. Like say for example, like unless we are socially developed, what is the point of having economic development? That means what is required to start with, that we should have a better life, or we should try to create better human capabilities. If we are able to create better human capabilities, that itself is something to be valued. Okay, but if we are able to create human capabilities, what would happen? That enhanced human capabilities will contribute to the process of growth. Okay, and if creating human capabilities includes or contributes to the process of growth, then the economy will be enabled to further human capabilities more. So, see how both how things are, human capabilities and growth are linked. If we are able to create human capabilities, that we will have better manpower, better human resources. If we are if we have healthy human being, literate human being, then that type of manpower, when you have that type of manpower, will be able to contribute to the process of development, and when so that means we will have better growth, and when we have better growth in the economy, then that economy will be able to invest more for human capability, for further development of human capabilities. Okay. So so the economic and social progress are interlinked. If we can get one, we will be able to get another. Like, say for example, to elaborate that same argument, basic education, good health and other human attainments are not only directly valuable as a constituent elements of our basic capabilities. Okay, like when someone has got basic education and good health and some other capabilities, that capabilities itself are to be valued. But what is important, these capabilities will also help in generating economic success, which in turn can contribute to enhance the quality of human life. Okay, this is what is important. Now, but we should not assume that if we are able to enhance human capabilities, automatically we will get economic growth. We should not assume that, because we have some we have experience, like for example, Kerala is quite advanced in terms of some of the social indicators. Kerala is very developed in terms of some of the social indicators, but Kerala could not transform that advantage to economic development. Economically, Kerala is not that much developed. If you particularly comparatively, if you look at the type of human capabilities or type that Kerala has been was successful to create, that capabilities has not been automatically transformed into creating capabilities for economic development. But actually the first point is to create the human capabilities, through various measures, social policy measures, we should be able to create social capabilities. Unless we are able to create social capabilities, there is no question of its potential to transform that into economic development. So, what is important is to create human capabilities, and if we are able to create human capabilities, there is a likelihood that may be transformed into economic development, that may promote economic development. Okay, this is one point actually when we are discussing about reform. Actually, we would like to we are trying to emphasize about the social side of economic reform. Okay, economic reform by itself is not enough. Economic reform to become successful, there's it may require it will require to create human capabilities. We will elaborate in this point further in our discussion. Okay, now let us look at let us we will be discussing, we will take a regional perspective on social development. Now, one very striking feature of Indian economy is deep diversities characterize Indian economy. This is something very special for India. We have deep diversities. the diversities are related to the various factors like India's varied history before independence and after British left, the diversities that we have, it has some historical origin and also what type of historical origin this diversity has. For instance, when the state of Kerala was created, the state of Kerala was created out of three regions. One is Travancore, Cochin and Malabar. These three regions together constituted the new state of Kerala after independence. Okay. Now, what is interesting that Travancore and Cochin, these two areas were not under British rule. They were ruled by they were under princely states. They were princely state, whereas Malabar region was under British rule. Now what happened? Travancore and Cochin, as these two regions were under princely state, and these two area fortunately were developed were very developed in terms of social indicators, or in terms of they had good social development. They have achieved good social development, like in terms of education, literacy, education, health, etc., etc. Travancore and Cochin, these regions of Kerala was already very advanced, whereas Malabar region, which was under British rule, they were lagging behind in these terms. So, just imagine, even one particular state which is constituted, the one particular state has a different past. One part or two parts of that state were very developed historically in terms of social indicator, whereas another part was very backward. So, so you see why there is deep diversities. Okay. Now, after British left, what happened? After British left, what happened? We have different states in our country. So, different states, and what happened? If you look at India, in India there are in different states different political party came to power at some point of time. Okay. Now, when different political parties came to power in different states, these political parties, they have different ideologies and they followed different policies. So, that is how what happened. Not only the states were different, they have different history, but even the present, at present, India is ruled by various states of India is ruled by different political parties, and different political parties have different capabilities, different type of organization, different policies, etc., etc. That is why India, the present of India is very diverse. Historically, we have this a lot of differences, and politically also we have lot of differences. So, India is full of diversities. Okay. And to add to it, Indian constitution itself has added to it. What in Indian constitution there are three lists. There are some items under the state policy which are under state government, like some areas, in some areas state government has the sole authority to act, but then there are some areas where central government has the absolute authority, and there is something called concurrent list, where both state and central government will have to play a role. This is very interesting, like you know, some areas like maybe for primary education, state government will have play a role, you know, or in the area of education, state government has will play the most important role. So, you know, what type of primary education that will have in state will vary from state to state. Okay, whereas some areas central government will play its role. So it is the central government will decide in those areas what policies central government will take, and of course there are some areas where state and central both play a role. Okay, so the Indian constitution also has added to this diversity that we have in our country. What is the advantage or disadvantage of this type of diversity that we have? So first of all, we what we are saying that India has lot of diversities. These diversities has originated from its past, because each region has a different type of history, different type of past experience. That is one thing. Second thing is that, you know, in the present each states are governed by different political party. That is why, you know, there are differences, and also the Indian constitution has allotted some of the items, social items, or some of the areas of policy making are under state government, some of the area of policy making is under central government, and some under concurrent list, and this has added to this diversity. And this, because of this diversities, one important thing is that some states are very advanced, some states are very backward. Now when now backward states can learn from advanced states which are very advanced. That is one advantage. Okay, there is the great, so we can learn, we can take lessons. We need not look into other countries to start with. We can learn something just from looking without India. Lot of things we can learn looking at the experience of what is happening in some part of our country. Now let me mention here something like, say for instance, like, you know, like say midday meal program. You know, I have earlier mentioned about the midday meal program. Now midday meal program was introduced in Tamil Nadu by M.G. Ramchandran. Okay, now that was very successful. You know, that was very successful. So then other states started following Tamil Nadu, and so other states got an advantage to learn from the experience of other countries. Now almost all states of the country has introduced midday meal, because they have seen that how midday meal contributed to increase the enrollment in the school. Okay, so that is one advantage. We could learn from other states, or say I'll mention about some other policy, like say for instance, in our country, particularly in the rural areas, we find that girls you know, they do not enroll in higher school that much, or there is a lot of dropout rate, particularly among the girls, when it comes to enrolling in the higher in post primary stage or high school. Now why that happens? You know what happens? You know, we have primary school almost in many villages. Okay, in the villages or nearby village there are primary schools. Okay, so parents will send their children, boys and girls, to the primary school. Okay, but when they reach to the stage of enrolling in the high school, now often high schools may be located in a far off place which is very far from the village. Now what happened? Indian parents often hesitate to send their girl child or send their daughters to a school which is away from the village, you know, because commuting is a problem, security of the daughter is also an issue. So as a result, what happened often the girls after primary school they do not enroll in high school because there is no high school available in the village. Okay. Now to overcome this problem, one program was introduced. It was said that if girls enroll them in the high school, government will provide them a bicycle for commuting to the school. And say for instance, Nitish Kumar did that in Bihar. Of course, this was done in many other states also, but I am just taking the example of Bihar. And Nitish Kumar, when he was the chief minister that time, he introduced a policy that providing bicycle to the girl student, and this is conditional that if they are enrolled in the high school and if they regularly come to the school, then they will be provided that bicycle. And it was found in studies later on that contributed to the enrollment of girls in the high school. Okay. Now, when this happened, now other states when they saw this, they also started adopting this policy. For instance, West Bengal, there is a policy, there is a program called which has been named as Shobuj Sathi Prokolpo. Now, in that actually initially girl students were provided bicycle, and now this has been extended, even sometime boys are also given bicycle. So, now because this this has contributed to enrollment in the school. And actually what happens, when bicycle is provided to all the girls, then only they will come to the school, because what happened, this is a group behavior, like all the parents should think that their daughters should attend school, they should think as a group, then only they will come to school. Like one parent may provide a bicycle to his daughter, but that may not change the behavior, because one girl may not would like to go to the school by using bicycle, but if all the girls from a village they are provided bicycle, then all of them will go as a group, and that will change the behavior, and that was the contribution of this particular scheme. This encouraged the girls to attend high school. Okay, and now so this from that other states have learned, like and they have adopted this policy. So there is an advantage, you can learn, but of course it is not always that one state will learn from other state always. They may not, they may go to the reverse direction also. Like there is another example I may cite here, like for example in Bihar at one in the recent past, Nitish Kumar has declared that all the liquor shop to be closed. Okay, no liquor shop would be allowed to operate in the rural area. And when this was done, then there was there's a lot of criticism. Then it was said then what this liquor shop owners will do. This said they can sell milk, etc. So anyway, now it was found out that when this was done, this policy has contributed to reducing violence in the family and many other in Bihar, what is to happen often among the poorer family, men will go and drink, and they will spend their money in drinking, they will remain indebted, and they may not whatever they earn and they may spend in drinking. So to stop that, a policy measures were taken to close all the liquor shops, and that has many positive impact in the social life in rural area that studies have pointed out. But in spite of that, government of West Bengal has gone into reverse direction. They have, for earning more revenue, they have allowed opening up a new liquor shop in the panchayats where there is no other there is no liquor shop, so that is a reverse thing anyway. But at least they have something, they have one government can learn from other government, at least there are some good examples is there. So this is one advantage of having this type of diversities, okay, that one state can learn from other state. We need not learn from other countries only. But actually the average, but actually it is not that we have to learn only from looking into inside our India. India can learn from other countries also. The average levels of literacy, life expectancy, infant mortality, etc. in India are enormously adverse compared to China, and yet in all this respect Kerala does significantly better than China. Okay. For example, like if you look at this figures, like say for example, if we look at adult female literacy rate, like if we compare India and China, okay. Now okay, this is little dated data, but still the trend that I am trying to show that is valid. Like if you compare India and China, of course India has better female literacy rate. India has 39% literacy rate, where India has China has 68%. But see, but if you look at one of the states of India, that's Kerala. Kerala has a literacy rate much higher than China. Okay. So see, though we can say that India can learn from China, but what about Kerala? Kerala, we can learn from Kerala is better than China. Okay. Or supposing look at life expectancies. Now here for Kerala this figure is 69 years, whereas Kerala is much better, 72 years, as almost equal to South Korea. Now fertility rate, in terms of fertility rate, in Kerala is doing much better than China. In China, fertility rate at when this data was collected was 2. India, in Kerala it was better, is 1.8, less than China. Okay. Infant mortality rate for boys and girls, similarly, for boys in China it is 28, whereas in Kerala it is much less, much better, 17. For girls it was 33, in Kerala it is much better, much less, in 16. So we cannot say that India has to learn from China, but Kerala has much to learn from the experience of other countries. Of course, Kerala has to learn from other countries. So that means, India, it is not that India has to learn from China, even China may have to learn from Kerala, but at the same time Kerala has to learn from other countries, because in spite of having better social development, Kerala was not that successful to convert that social development to economic advantage, okay, or economic development. Okay. Now one would say that why suddenly India and China comparison or contrast, why I am talking about India and China, there are so many other countries. Why we are talking about India and China? Because India and China, there are some similarities. What type of similarities do you have? In terms of size, both India and China is a vast country, okay. So that makes comparison fruitful, okay. And India, when it became independent, that time India was a poor country. Similarly, after revolution, when China started its journey, it was also very poor country, and there are a lot of deprivation etc. in China. So, they had that type, there also there are similarities. Okay. And both these civilizations are very old. Chinese civilization and Indian civilization are very old. We have both have long tradition of trade and commerce. Okay. So, both the countries have large expatriate community who can play an important role in the development of the country, you know. So, because of this reason, it is useful to compare India's situation with China. That is why we are talking about India and China. Okay. Now, let us look at some other figures like say for example, adult literacy rate, you know, in 1991 census and in 2011, these two figures we have. Now, if you look at in 1991 and in 2011, literacy, male literacy in India was 64, China it was much higher. Even if we look at the figure for 1991, in China it was much higher. Similarly, if we compare the literacy, adult literacy rate in 91 and 2011, and if we compare with China, it was higher. But if we compare with if we take one of the state of India, which is Kerala, now you see Kerala was doing much better than China, though in China was China as a nation was doing better than India, okay, in terms of male and female literacy. But if we look at Kerala, Kerala was, when China it was 87% the male literacy, in India in Kerala it was 94%, okay. And for the male, but in 91 of course it was same. Female literacy also, whereas China it was 68%, Kerala was 86%, etc. Okay. But at the same time we should also look at some other side of the picture. UP is one of the state which is lagging behind, and UP was much behind China, Kerala and Indian figure. In UP it was 56%, 77% and 25%, etc. Okay. So, you know, so if you compare these figures, you know, that these figures says that actually we can learn from inside India, we can learn from some states, like we can learn from Kerala, but you know, we can learn, we can learn from China, but at the same time we can learn from within India, some state which is advanced, or say a state like UP can learn from Kerala, how Kerala were able to achieve this type of high adult literacy rate. Okay. So, so this point is very important. We can learn from within and also from outside. Okay. Now, here in this figure, actually we have female literacy rate and male literacy rate for states of India and provinces of China. Okay. In this figure, in this particular figure, we have plotted the states of India in terms of female and male literacy. Like say for instance, if we take this particular state, female literacy is 30%, whereas male literacy is 60%. Okay. So, this way we have plotted the states of India, and we have plotted the provinces of China. Now, very interestingly, if we see all provinces of China is placed much higher than Indian states. Indian states are located here, whereas all the provinces of China is located much higher. So, one can say that you know, if we look at the diversities, even taking this diversity in the account, each Chinese provinces are much higher placed in terms of male and female literacy. But what is interesting, that one state of India, that is the state of Kerala, which is placed in much higher than all the states of India and all the provinces of China. Okay. On the reverse side, if you take Tibet, one of the province of China, which is lagging behind all the Chinese states and all the Indian states, so this type of diversities are there. Another point which emerges from this, that the Chinese provinces are closely located in terms of literacy, whereas in Indian states are little dispersed in terms of female and male literacy. Okay. That was about India China comparison and lessons that we can get from that. Now we will discuss about India's educational backwardness. Okay. Now it is very interesting, and we should take note of this. Now when we say that India is backward in terms of educational achievement, what is most important or most remarkable is that in India, in terms of higher education, we are doing very good. Okay. But in terms of basic education, we are so much behind. This is very striking. In one country is doing so well in terms of higher education, like take the example of institution like IITs or IIMs or central universities. They are comparable with some of the good universities or institutions of the world. Okay. But at the same time, if we look at primary education, situation is so bad there. We are doing very badly. Just think of the type of infrastructure, type of facilities that we have in a higher educational institution like IITs or IIMs, and just think of a rural primary school and compare these two. A rural primary school often may have only one classroom. Many of the rural primary schools have only one classroom or at the most two classrooms. A rural primary school, government primary school may have, these schools are single teacher school. Many of the schools are single, there is only one teacher, and one teacher will have to and there is one room, that one teacher will have to teach students belonging to various classes. Some students may belong to class 1, some students may belong to class 2, class 3, etc., and they will be sitting in one room, and one teacher will have to teach all of them. So you can imagine how a meaningful learning can take place in this type of situation. This is the condition of majority of the primary school in rural areas of our country. And just think of some central university, or just think of institutions like IITs and IIMs, type of facilities that students get in those type of institutions. This is very remarkable. But but in spite of that, what is very surprising, policymakers, they do not take note of this. Government after government spending money, we spend very little money for education, but whatever money we spend, that is spent for expansion of higher education. Like for instance, the government decided that there should be an IIT and IIM in all states. every state will have one IIT or one IIM, every states will have one central university, you know. So, this type of expansion we are talking about, whereas you know, this involves enormous amount of fund allocation. Whatever little fund that we allocate for for education, lot of this fund goes for expansion of higher education facilities, not basic education or primary education. This is the tragedy of our country. And with that, if you add in the recent past, you know, particularly after 1991, when we started the process of privatization, you know, what has happened, that many private engineering colleges, you know, other professional institutions have started. So, there is, apart from government expanding higher education, there are lot many institutions of higher education have been started by in the private sector, you know. Private groups, they have in the private sector lot of expansion has taken place in our country in terms of higher education. But if you think of primary education or basic education, we are lagging behind so much, and our policymakers do not take note of that. Whatever expansion we do, mostly we do on higher education, not on primary education. Now the question is, why this is so, why this happened, you know. Now, this type of educational inequality is reflect the type of inequality that we have in our country, and that is being sustained, you know. Like, for instance, what has happened that, you know, those who are educated, or so educated middle class, they would like to have you know, better type of education facility for their children, and policymakers or political leaders, they know that if they promise that they will set up institution of higher education or institution of higher learning, educated middle class will be able to send their children to those institutions, and they will get vote. Okay. So, they will keep on promising that they will expand and create higher educational facilities, and whereas the poorer parents, you know, they their children go to primary schools of very inferior quality, and nothing happens there. So, actually this is being sustained because of the type of inequality, because basically we our society, we have lot of inequality. There are upper class, upper middle class, you know, they promote their interest, you know, whereas there are marginalized section, they cannot assert their interest, and that is how this continues. And interestingly, even Indian left parties are also they are part of this, following this type of disparities, you know. Like Indian left parties came to power for some time in West Bengal or in Kerala, but what was found that even those left parties, they did not give much importance to primary education. They also, whatever policy they took, in those policy favored expansion of higher education. Now, why it was expected that left party may give importance to primary education? This is because the countries where, you know, left parties were in power, like communist parties were in power, they are in power, like if you think of China, or if you think of, say, Vietnam or some other countries. In those countries, you know, one thing has happened, that lot of expansion has happened in terms of primary education or basic education, you know. But in our country, left parties are are exception to that. Even left parties are very elitist when it comes to educational expansion. And this has also something to do with the religion. Both Hindu religion and Islamic religion are very much elitist. Like in Hindu religion, the priest would say, or they will propagate that higher education is meant for mainly higher caste, and that has some influence in some parts of our society. Similarly, in under Islamic religion, the mullahs also are very elitist. They would say that higher education is for those who are better off, or etc., those who belong to higher strata. So religion that way is influenced. The poor people, poorer section, or the may think that their higher education is not meant for them. They may not send their children, or they may not aspire to send their children for higher education, or they may not have a very much strong motivation to send their children for higher education, because firstly, one thing, they may not be able to afford that, and secondly, religion also may influence their thinking that okay, higher education is for elite class, or higher education is for those who belong to higher caste or higher class, that is not meant for poorer section or those who belong to marginalized section. This also has played some role to in creating this type of elitism in education in our country. But here Buddhist religion is slightly egalitarian. The countries where there is where majority of the people follow Buddhism, in those countries, like for example in Thailand, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, in these countries they are mainly predominantly they follow Buddhist religion. They are actually in these countries give lot of emphasis in the spread of primary education. So religion also has a role to play in the type of education expansion that will happen in our in a particular country. Okay. Now another interesting thing, all these countries like Thailand, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, India, all these countries were under British rule. Okay. Now when we are under British rule, the Western ruler when what they did, Western ruler, they what they did, that they expanded the existing basis. The Western ruler, they furthered the existing disparity that they were having. Like for instance, Britishers, they in our country, they expanded higher education. They built very good higher education institution. All the old universities that we have in our country, those universities were set up under British rule. Okay, that was one thing. So what Britishers did, like Britishers, they found that in this country education is for the elite section, so they furthered that. That here there is a elitist bias in education, so they emphasized on higher education. They did not give that much emphasis in the spread of primary education. Whereas the same Britishers, when they were ruling in Thailand or China or Myanmar, they are actually they emphasized in the expansion of primary education. That is another interesting point. Now, what lessons do we get from this type of educational backwardness that we find in India? There are two types of biases. One is the ancient bias, and another is the modern bias. So both this type of biases have to be addressed, like for instance, what happened sometime, advancement of basic education has happened in our country from forces which were against tradition. Like what has happened, in some parts of our country, there was lower caste movement in for expansion of education. So that resulted, expansion of education in some parts of the country, and sometimes this has also happened through missionaries, maybe sometimes Christian missionaries and all, like say you will find some parts of our country are little ahead in terms of say primary education or in terms of education in general. Now this has happened sometime through lower caste or lower class movement, like for example Goa, Mizoram, Kerala, these states, they are quite advanced in terms of education, and this has resulted, either through lower caste, lower class movement, or due to the effort that was taken by Christian missionaries. Okay. Now, actually the real difference has been made by political activism in the direction of educational expansion for the lower class and lower caste groups. Like actually, one thing is obviously Christian missionaries played a very important role in expansion in education in some parts of our country, or social movement played a very important role. Like for instance in Maharashtra, Mahar caste were very much organized, and as a result of that there are a lot of expansion taken place in terms of education among that caste group. That has happened. But what is most important, that what type of policy is being adopted or being taken by the political leadership, that is most important. Like for example, like we were talking about Kerala. The Kerala, as one part of Kerala where was as we mentioned, that quite backward, like in the Malabar region of Kerala was quite backward in terms of education, or because when it was under British rule, the education was expansion of education was neglected, whereas Malabar and Cochin, these two regions were under princely state. These states were quite advanced. Okay, but what has happened, today the entire Kerala is quite advanced in terms of education, and this has happened because the type of policy that was taken by various political leadership that came to power. Sometime it was left parties, sometime it was other than left parties, sometime Congress came into power, sometime CPM or Communist Party came into power. But whatever may be the case, these parties they took the policies which has done away with the type of disparity in terms of education that was there in Kerala. Now the entire state is quite advanced in terms of education. So what is important, that what is being done by the political leadership today, that is what is very important for educational expansion. Now we will look at adult literacy rate for the year 2011 to 2015, and we will try to understand or try to show how India is lagging behind in terms of education. Like if you look at the total literacy rate and female literacy rate in these 2 years, the figures are from these 2 years. Like you see, in India the literacy rate, total literacy rate is 74%, and female literacy rate is 65%. Now Now, let us look at whereas of course China was much advanced than India in these terms. Now, look at some of these African countries like Zimbabwe, Botswana, Kenya, Nigeria and Ghana. Now, these are the sub-Saharan African countries, these countries are considered to be very backward country, they face a lot of problem like famine, etc., time and again. But in spite of that, it is very surprising that except Nigeria, all these African countries is quite advanced in terms of adult literacy rate than India. Whether you look at Zimbabwe, Botswana, Kenya, all these countries have very higher literacy rate than India. It is something. So this shows the educational backwardness of India. Even the countries which we consider very backward, when it comes to adult literacy, these African countries, sub-Saharan African countries are much advanced than India. Now the question is, what happens if we have this type of inequality in education? What is the problem? We have mentioned that in India we have lot of inequality in terms of education. Now what happened when we have this type of inequality? What is the result of this? Now see, what happened if we have this type of disparity, this type of inequality in terms of education, then what happened whenever the new economic opportunity is created, those who are lagging behind in terms of education, that section will not be able to take advantage of new economic opportunities. That means even if we develop or there are some economic opportunities created in our country, what would happen? Only the elite section will be able to take advantage of those facilities. Like for instance, when the globalization happened, lot of new economic opportunities were created. Like for instance, there are a lot of call centers came up, and those call centers created new job opportunities. Okay. Now what has happened? Who could get employment in those call centers? It is only the urban educated group. They could get employment in this job, in this call center job. So see, when we have adopted economic reform which has created new economic opportunities, now because of this type of economic disparity we have, only those who were educated, they were benefited from this type of new opportunity that was created. What we will see in a table now, that that role of basic education is very important even for the success of market reform. We are talking about market reform, and we are saying that market reform will enable us to develop to achieve higher growth. But we must remember that even for the success of market reform depends on expansion of basic education. Like for instance, South Korea, Hong Kong, Thailand, they started introducing market reform in the 1960s. In the 1960s they started following or adopting market reform. Now at that point of time, what is the adult literacy rate in these countries? It was around 70%. Like in South Korea it was 71%, Hong Kong it was 70%, Thailand it was 68%. And not only that, China started reform process much later in 1980s. In 1980, the adult literacy rate in China was 69. So you see, when all these countries they went for market reform, when they opened up their economy, that time itself these countries had attained around 70% of adult literacy. Now what about India? we have introduced market reform in the year 90, okay, and what was the adult literacy rate in the year 1992? It was only 52% in the year 1992. So it's now actually it is not that market reform itself will be successful. Market reform is very successful in in South Korea, Hong Kong and Thailand and China. It is because at that time they have attained adult literacy of 70%, whereas India, when we introduced market reform, we had only 52% adult literacy. So market reform by itself may not be able to generate growth, or it may not be very successful. So what is the problem? Actually, we have too much government and too little government. Both are problem. Actually, when we talk about market reform, we say that government should withdraw. And market, we should give importance to market in market forces. But actually, the issue is that we have too much government in some areas and too little government in some other area. Like for example, in the area of education, hardly government is doing anything. We need more presence of government in terms of education. We spend very little amount for expansion of education, and that too for expansion of basic education. So actually there we need more government action, more presence of government there, and in some other regions, some other areas, we need less presence of government. Okay. Now, because if we don't do that, what would happen? Supposing we have the type of illiteracy that we have in our country at present, what would happen? Even if we have market reform, what will happen, that we will have an economy which will be characterized by inequality. Like what happened in Brazil, they achieved higher growth rate, okay, but in spite of higher growth rate, what happened in Brazil, there is a lot of economic disparity, because there is literacy rate, majority of people were not literate, and because of that, what happened in Brazil, there is a lot of disparity, and there is a lot of socio-economic problem Brazil was facing. On the other hand, South Korea, when market reform happened there, actually it enabled South Korea to have an egalitarian, more or less egalitarian or overall growth of the economy. So here we have a choice to make, whether we want to go the Brazilian way or we want to go a South Korean way. Like if we want to go a South Korean way, if we want that overall development for all sections of the society, market reform by itself will not be enough. We would need to have much social development. Similarly, actually role, China, we often say that China was very successfully, China has integrated its economy very successfully to the world economy. It has liberalized its economy, and and that is how it is progressing. But if you look at that, if India has to evaluate China in market success, it is not adequate just to liberalize economic controls in the way the Chinese have recently done. In China, the force of China's market economy rests on the solid foundation of social changes in education, in healthcare and land reform that made the market function the way it has China. Like for example, just having market reform is not enough. When you say that market reform is doing wonder in China, we often forget that when before adopting market reform, China was able to develop in terms of education, in terms of healthcare, etc., etc. And it is because of that type of base China had, higher literacy rate, better health facilities and land reform, etc., etc. Very successful implementation land reform. Because of all these, the benefit of market reform has worked wonderfully in China. So if we just say that China, market reform was successful in China, why we should not follow the path? We should keep in mind that it was successful in China because China was able to attain higher social development when it opened up its economy for market reform, when it started market reform in our country. Now, but in India, what is happening? If we look at this particular table, this table shows growth rates of expenditure and teaching and teaching inputs in elementary schools. This presents some figure that how we spend, how we invest on teaching inputs in elementary schools. Now in the 50s, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, how we have spent. Now we see recurring expenditure increased from 50s to 60s to 60s and 70s. Then it started going down from 8.5% to 5.8, then 2.8, then it slightly increased. But in terms of number of teachers, you see this expenditure, number of teachers in elementary school, it started going down from 5.6 in 50s. In the 90s, it came down to 1.6. In terms of teacher population ratio, similarly from 3.6 it came down to minus 0.5. So what we'd like to say, point out that not only we allot very little for educational expansion, that amount we invest on educational expansion, that is going down over the years. Now, so actually, the debate here is not whether we are someone is pro market reform or someone is against market reform. It is not just that. The fundamental changes that are needed in India cannot be made just by moderate reforms that only focuses on reducing the negative activities of the government, neglecting the positive function that it can perform in bringing social opportunities within the reach of all. This is what is important. Like when we talk about market reform, we are talking about the negative role of government, that government should withdraw from some areas of economic activity. There should not be a negative role of government in terms of economic activity. But we should also emphasize not only state should withdraw there, but what is required is in more presence of government in some other regions. What are those areas? This is in the area of education, health, nutrition, etc. So what is required, that we need more government in social sector, more strong presence of government in social sector, while restricting government activity maybe in some of the economic areas. Okay, and that is what is the actually the gist of the discussion that we have, that actually we cannot, this is not whether we should go for market reform or whether government should withdraw, or whether there should be presence of government or absence of government. What is required? The presence of government in social sector. The government should be more active for social development, and that would contribute to success of market reform. With this, we conclude this session. Thank you.